Well, good afternoon, and I want to thank you for joining us here today on the CBC, our podcast, and also our broadcast, which is our Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. So every single week when we do this, we try to bring on what I call a subject matter expert, someone that can bring value, because our entire purpose in doing this show is to share value with industry members, people in other industries, and how we can help them. So today is no difference. Today I have a superstar guest on here with me that I think is going to be able to speak very solidly and very knowledgeably about our subject matter. And the subject matter is the owner and general manager of a home service contracting business in the year 2021. And my guest today, her name is Debbie Wiedwald. And I've known Debbie for many, many years, and she owns and operates a home service contracting business that has their niche in the chimney service business by the name of Blackburns Chimney in Columbus, Ohio. So Debbie, how you doing today? Let's tell folks a little bit about yourself.
Sure. It's good to see you. It's been a while. I own Blackburns Chimney Services, and our company's been in business. This is our 35th year. I've been with the company for 19 years, and my late husband, Steve Blackburn, started the company. And when he passed, I continued the company on.
Right. So when Steve passed, were you were working in the business at that time, or you were not working in the business when that fell on you?
I was working in the business. And so actually in 2002, I joined the company to work, part-time so that I could be home and work with the children's schedule and, be home when they got home from school and have snack time with them and all that other fun stuff you can do as a parent, and when you can have some flexibility with your schedule. And as they got older, they didn't necessarily want to have mom around all the time, and so I spent more time at the company. And when Steve passed in 2011, I just continued it on, because that was something to do every day, as well as what I had known for quite a while.
Gotcha. So before you went to work with Steve in the business, what were you doing? You were working before then. You and I knew each other. I actually met you. Steve and you were traveling to Florida one time to go on a Disney cruise, and you, Steve, and the kids stopped by my retail store, and that was the first time I'd met you. So what were you doing before you got into this industry?
My background is in social work, and I was working in child welfare.
You work okay, got you covered. Because I can remember Steve, and that was one of the things when we were in the same mixed group, and Steve would always talk about your influence and how you were trying to get him to give employee benefits and other things back in those days, and how it was going on, how those type of things. So in today's world, it's 2021. What's it like to be a female, a lady, that runs a business such as this, that's conceived as something that a man should be doing? How's that feel in this day and time?
Most days I don't notice a difference. When I first got in the industry, and it may have been just the experience, I remember going to a chimney sweep convention, and at the trade show, I walked around with a gentleman who had been in the industry forever. And so where I thought he would help me as a bridge, meeting people in the industry, I was pretty much, the assumption was made that I was maybe his assistant, an office person, that type of thing. And most of the conversations were directed to him. And it was quite frustrating trying to speak with the vendors and getting to know a little bit more about the industry, with not having people really talk or really engage with me. But that has changed, and maybe part of it has to do with the confidence that I have now and the people that I know in the industry. Occasionally, we'll get phone conversations or calls where, let me talk to the owner. They won't assume or won't understand that I am the owner. I remember it wasn't that long ago, actually, I was at an industry event, and again, this assumption was made that I was an office person only or an assistant. But for the most part, people maybe will ask me a little bit, you're the owner, with that questioning. But for the most part, people take it in stride that I'm the owner and able to make the decisions, on behalf of the company.
Would you say it was tougher to get vendors and suppliers to recognize you than it was your customers, possibly?
Perhaps initially, and customers don't seem, like I said, have much problems with wondering if, I am the owner or I can address their concerns. I mean, occasionally you'll get somebody who's like, okay, you're the daughter of the owner or you're, the spouse of the owner. And it's like, no, I'm the owner.
Gotcha. So what about hiring of employees? What's it like? And, and Cheryl, my wife, runs a factory, she has a manufacturing company. So it's kind of a similar thing in that she's running a manufacturing company and she has guys that work for her in all these different departments. So what about from the hiring standpoint? Whenever people come in and they find out that Blackburns is owned by a woman, do you see any factors that come into play in that?
I don't. And maybe one or two employees may have questioned and asked, am I really the owner? But for the most part, the employees just take it in stride. And quite honestly, if they're not able to really dialogue with me or, then I really question if they are going to be able to communicate with our customers, since so many of our customers are women. They're making decisions on behalf of the household.
Yeah, I know when I walk through Cheryl's plant, I haven't been there in a while, and people see this guy that comes in the back door, and it's like, well, who's that guy? And and some coworker, it's one of his workers that works with him will say, well, that's Cheryl's husband, Jerry. Well, is he the guy that really owns it? It's like, no, like we don't ever see him. He got nothing to do with this whatsoever. So would people come in when they look? I mean, Jim is your production manager. Is it, do they understand that this is a hierarchy, that you're the top dog in this operation? You're the one that makes the decisions.
I think they do. However, my leadership style is very collegial and, I sometimes will ask questions of Jim in terms of help me to understand why this vendor versus a different vendor, or why we're, pursuing this line of product versus a different line. But for the most part, it's just mainly, deferring to Jim and the decisions that he makes with regard to, the vendors.
Yeah, I got you covered. So in all, in running a service business in the year 2021, being a woman is really not a problem like it would have been 40 years ago. Would you agree with that? Looking back, and I can remember the stories that Cheryl has shared, what it was like 40 years ago, 30 years ago, to be a woman in that ownership role. Like did your daddy give it to you or whatever, all those kind of things. Okay. So, but it's a really good subject matter. When you look at it, I know a lot of my clients and people like Brandy that was just on here, when you look at it, basically if you go to Flues Brothers, Brandy's the one running the operation much more than Jeremy is as a rule. And you look at it, and that's not the only place around the country you see this. I mean, I often see that women are so capable in a managerial role, it is unreal. And in hiring GMs and stuff, many times a woman is the top candidate these days.
Yeah, there really shouldn't be a difference in this day and age. There should be opportunities, equal for women and men, definitely in leadership.
No, I don't see it where it should be a difference. Like I said, it's something coming up. And if I'm an old Southern boy and I can accept this from the deep South where I'm from, then anybody ought to be able to accept it this day, that kind. So as you've done this, Debbie, you have taken this company, I'm going to say, and describe, since under your leadership, you've taken it to a very high level. One of the things is, you moved from one facility and you've got an extremely nice facility. I guess are you still in the same facility that I visited you were in a couple of years ago?
Yes, I absolutely love the the building and the location, it's a great match for the company.
Okay, and the building you're in, is that a building that you purchased or is that a building that you're leasing?
No, we're purchasing it. I'm purchasing
Okay, so same token, when you went to the bank and you got your purchase agreement going, do you feel like there was anything held against you because you were a female in this ownership role? Were there any challenges in funding your building?
No. Mm-mm.
So what made you decide to take this business to, I'm just going to call it a higher level? What was it that drove you there? If we look back at what y'all were doing at Blackburns before you took it over and where you're at today, there's a big, big difference. And that's because of Debbie. And what do you think drove you to do that?
Well, with my background in child welfare, and at that location, there's so many regulations and just so many requirements and paperwork. And so for me to be running a company that's much more structured, feels more familiar, I guess, given my background. In child welfare, you have to document, and, if something wasn't documented, it didn't happen. Similarly, as we do inspections, it's so important to document as well.
Yeah, got you covered. Now, one of the things you had, and like I said, you brought up that Steve passed away in 2011. And Steve and I were members of a mixed group that I had dropped out before you came in, and then you had this mixed group. How important was this mixed group to you from a support mechanism? And did they recognize you as an individual, or how long was it before you weren't Steve's wife that you were Debbie?
Well, as you know, with the mixed group process, you go and visit other companies. And I had met most of the people in the mixed group a few times because they had, came to our company when Steve was alive. And so I always felt accepted by the members of the mixed group. And so once, when Steve passed, the group members were extremely supportive, wanting to help. I had folks, come and visit me. And as I visited other companies, I felt comfortable, with my strengths and, more running the offices and just with fresh eyes, because I ask a lot of questions because, I was a sponge just trying to learn everything as well. So I think for the first few years in the mixed group, maybe I was receiving a lot more than I was giving back. But I still think I, brought strengths and was able to give back through the mixed group as well.
Got you covered. So let me ask you this, Debbie, and this, like I said, when we started this, I told you we might get a little emotional in this, and you said I can deal with it and all that. But, you went through a horrifying experience in the loss of Steve. I can still remember the night, and I got a phone call from a member of the mixed group, and I'm in the floor when I got word of this. So and this is an important thing realistically, because this could be man, this could be woman, this could be my wife, it could be the same thing could happen to me. How did you bring yourself to term and move forward? Because I'll be honest with you, I'm a pretty strong guy. If something happened to her, I don't know what I would do, Debbie. And I really, truly mean that. She's such a part of everything I do. So how did you gather this strength, Debbie? Because that's one of the things I've admired about you is right after this happened, and I saw you at a heat shield conference, and it was like you were into doing this. You were into this. This wasn't you were an individual. This wasn't feel sorry for Debbie. Debbie was a human being that was moving forward. How did you manage to do that, Debbie?
Oh, there were a lot of stages. And I think there even continues to be stages in grief. It's not something that you get over, or you just at some point come to terms with and move forward with the loss and the grief. Initially, I was just trying to get by day to day. There was a lot of maybe, kind of putting my head in the sand a little bit in terms of waiting for everything to implode. Having lost your person and losing that direction. And also, you know, like that co-pilot, you know, that in that relationship, there's just so many adjustments, and they talk about that in loss groups as well, all of the secondary losses. And this is a little different than what you asked, but, you know, I'm sure you recall Steve was a phenomenal cook. And for our family, one of the huge losses was Steve's cooking. And, you know, I visited with my son recently, and he was talking about, oh, my trying to make food. And he referenced it as an experiment because it was just not the same. And so, you know, when you move forward, you know, there's a lot of changes, and a lot of moving forward had to do with, you know, just trying to get through the day. At that time, when Steve passed, I was training for a marathon, and I am so grateful for that experience because I had a training plan. So every day there was an expectation out there in terms of what I was going to do in terms of my running and my training. And the running also provided a great release and exhausted me to the point so I was able to sleep at night and, you know, just really have an outlet for that. You know, and early on, I mean, there'd be days where I would, you know, visit the cemetery and have these conversations with Steve, you know, like, look what you left me and all that. And, you know, it's evolved now to, you know, I'm responsible and I've had to rebuild my life. And I think that happens to, you know, hopefully, ideally, you know, anybody who goes through, you know, life-changing circumstance, you know, eventually comes to terms with that change, that loss, and, you know, what does moving forward look like? And even today, I still, you know, we're in a different stage because right now I'm working in the company now longer without Steve than with Steve. And initially, I wasn't sure I would even get to this point. And so it's just been really interesting having that mindset of decisions made were really my decisions, and I can't look back anymore and, you know, blame Steve or, you know, that type of thing. I mean, we've moved forward. Yeah. It's a different company.
Hey, Debbie, the guy that I told you was looking for a chimney sweep, he's on here right now. He says, does your company come to Marion?
Oh, we do not. So, and I would have to I would recommend you search for.
So, Debbie, how important was, you know, Steve, like I said, a group of us got together some years before that tragic day, and we formed a mixed group, which is a management information exchange group. And I was one of the original. That's where I got to know Steve so deeply. Steve and I used to have conversations. Steve would call me. He would be on the way to go to a movie or something. He was talking about something, and you know, he just, you know, that guy, he just talked and talked and talked. But how important was it having this group of people to work, to rely upon in that mixed group?
Oh, phenomenal. I mean, I was still emailing people from the mixed group today. You know, it's having a group of supporters and people who have your back and where you can just go for advice is so important. And I think that was one of the first or very early lessons after Steve passed, was just the importance of, you know, building your people. You know, and who is going to be there for you, and build that team is extremely important.
Well, I know at the time, you know, that was when I was just starting in the coaching and different things. And I can remember these guys were really, and guys and gals in that mixed group, they were so supportive of you. And it was more than just a friendship. I think it was not a sympathy thing. These guys really cared about you. I can remember talking to Clay Lamb, because Clay's right over in Cincinnati, and remember conversations like, and I would ask him, how's Debbie doing? You know? And, you know, but I looked at it time, and those guys and gals in that mixed group had to be a tremendous asset to help you move to where you're at. So when one of the things that mixed groups do is you go to other locations and you visit other businesses. Do you feel that the employees at those other businesses valued your input just like they did the guys that were in the group?
I'd like to say yes. However, when we're looking at the truck and we're looking at the warehouse, I think maybe some of the other companies' employees maybe look more towards the other male business owners, mainly probably because they're in the truck and they operate in the warehouse more than what I do.
Yeah. Well, it's like Brandy that's on here right now. Brandy works with our company, and that means she actually visits company. It was really a kind of a funny story, but about 6 months ago, she made an initial visit with a new client. This was, or might have been a year ago. It was before COVID because I hadn't been able to get her out of Kansas City since COVID hit. Okay. She is locked down till this stuff's over with. She ain't traveling the way it is. But anyway, I remember that she went into their morning meeting and this guy was giving her a fit because he thought she was just some lady that the owner had hired. And when he found out that she owned and she was part owner of a chimney sweep business that was very successful in Kansas City, he was blown out of the water because he thought she was just some college educated coach, didn't know that she was coming in with the experience that she does. And and that's kind of where it is because, like I said, a lot of guys are hard to get through to and that kind of stuff. So, but it's really, really, like I said, I can't tell you enough how proud I am of you, of what you've done in that company. So what does the future hold for Blackburns? I mean, how many people you got? How many people are on your workforce right now?
We have 20 employees.
Okay. And then how many were there in 2011?
Maybe 15.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've had some turnover. I mean, we have some employees that have been there for the last 10 years, and it's been weird too that the majority of the employees didn't know Steve.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So, but his effect's still there. Have you still got the 56 Chevrolet?
It's a 57 Chevy.
57. Okay, I thought it was a 56.
Yep.
But you still got that, right?
Sure do.
I can remember when I visited y'all, that Chevrolet was in his showroom. When I walked in the door, it's like, Steve, what are you doing with the car in your showroom? You're not in the antique car business. You're in the fireplace business. I'm trying to understand, but I can remember. Do you still keep it in your building now, in your showroom, or what do you do with that thing now?
We don't. We ran out of space, and actually in 2016, I moved to a new house and remarried. And so the 57 Chevy is here at the house. Cat's visiting, sorry. But the funny story is that my new husband actually has a 57 Chevy as well. And that was partly how we met, because his profile, we met on online dating, but his profile had a picture of a 57 Chevy. And so I figured, well, if nothing happened out of this friendship or relationship, I would know maybe perhaps what to do with this 57 Chevy, because I don't know if you know, but I can't drive my 57 Chevy. It is a manual, and so I can't drive it. And with getting to know Mike, my husband, his Chevy is actually automatic. And so when we go to car shows, I drive his Chevy and he drives mine. And so it actually works out really well.
That's phenomenal. Well, Debbie, like I said, I think this has been a great call. I think that you've shared some things here that are close, they're personal. But like I said, I just want to let you know I am so proud of what you've done. And knowing Steve as I did, I know how proud he would be now. I can remember in fact, I'll tell you, I used to give him a hard time because I'd tell him, he would bring in the mixed group and it was input of yours. And it's like, you got to do this, you got to do this. And I'd tell him, Steve, you're crazy. What are you talking about? You can't stay in business with those ideas. But your ideas work, Debbie, because you've been very successful with them. They really, really have. So I want to appreciate you coming on here today. I appreciate the hound out of this, and to the people that have joined us. I like the Brandis Wiedwald said, I love the 57 Chevy story. But tell me this, Debbie, how come you've never learned to drive a straight drive since you own a 57 Chevrolet that is a manual shift? You've never tried, you don't want to, or what?
Well, that goes back a few years as well. And my dad was a car collector. And so we actually bought the 57 Chevy from my dad when he was downsizing and moving to Florida. And, when you talk about that partnership, I never had to learn how to drive it because Steve drove it. And so once he passed, that didn't seem like the time to learn how to drive the 57 Chevy. And then my brother-in-law, Bill, would drive it and get it out. And so now I got Mike that'll drive it, but it's, what is it, the 3 on the tree, and it's a little more complicated, and it's touchy. But anyways, my dad, through his collections of cars, he tried to teach me how to drive a stick shift. I think it was on a Corvette, when it was an older Corvette, and my dad has all these rules about Corvettes and when you drive them and don't, and how you park them and all that. Anyway, so it started raining, and the windshield wipers had never been used because you don't take Corvettes out in the rain. And so the windshield wipers were clacking and, not adjusted properly. And so it was just such a nightmare experience that I never felt the desire to learn how to drive a stick shift after that. Nor will I probably ever buy a Corvette because there's just too many rules around those.
Well, I've had 7 or 8 Corvettes in my life because I was a Corvette freak at one time. So I had them one right behind the other. I tell Cheryl, I'm getting you a new Corvette, and she know it ain't for you, it's for me. So I kind of hit it that way. But even my first wife, I told her I was getting her a Corvette back years ago. But, I never knew the rule that I couldn't drive it in the rain, though. So every one of mine, be honest with you, they were driven in the rain. So I guess I broke the rules with Corvettes. Maybe that's why I don't have a Corvette today. Maybe they took my right away to have Corvettes. What can we say?
So, my dad's rules.
Yeah. So Debbie, let me ask you one last question. If somebody because you have a significant story here, if someone were to face the adversities that you faced, what would be your advice to that person? How to move and live on?
Definitely look at self-care and reaching out to people. And you were very helpful and continue to be helpful in the mixed group. And the importance of building that network and having other folks provide support is so important. Nowadays with social media and Facebook groups, and there are so many different groups out there to provide support as well. When you are grieving and facing such a horrible loss. I think, trying as much not to isolate is important. And I think really it's important to feel those feelings, and accept them, because I think that helps with moving on to, next steps with the duality of life can be both great and sad at the same time. And, life doesn't have to end after a tragedy. You can use the lessons learned. I try to always remember to find the points to be grateful about and the positives, because there's a lot of gifts and blessings, even in the midst of tragedy. Facing those awful experiences after Steve passed, good things came out of that in terms of my relationship with Steve's brother is phenomenal. Shortly after Steve passed, my dad spent 2 weeks at my shop just being present and helping. And my brother came up and helped as well. And there's always, I think, gifts if you can look for them, and you may not see them initially, but even in tragedy, you have to, I think, look for the positives.
That's some remarkable thoughts, Debbie. I don't know if you saw what Randy put in there, but she said Debbie needs to write a book. But I'm going to also tell you that's what I've been telling Brandy for a while. So Brandy can't tell other people to write a book until she can write a book. But since I wrote books, I can say, Debbie, you need to write a book, okay? Because seriously, it's like I've told Clay and other people, the challenges you've been through, this can inspire other people. And that's what we work towards every day, is inspiring other people, helping them get to their dreams, doing those kind of things. So you, my young lady, you are an inspiration to myself and to so many others. And I just want to thank you so much for spending your time here with me this afternoon on this broadcast. Thank you very, very much. We appreciate you more than you know.
Thank you, Jerry.
Okay. And with that, my name's Jerry Eisenhower. Tune us in next time as we have another episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network.